Hello, today I'm talking about the Generation 2 version of the Lanshan Pro tent. Have the changes addressed all the issues with the tent, or is it an opportunity missed? So the Lanshan tents were launched back in 2017. They are trekking pole tents. They're extremely good value, and so they've been extremely popular. But they have got some issues and some weaknesses and some problems. So I was really excited to see the Generation 2 launched with some subtle changes. So here it is. This is the two-person Lanshan Pro tent. Very compact and lightweight, comes in at just over a kilo. I got this from Camperlists. Sir James is very helpful, good service and free delivery. Let's get it pitched, shall we? Right, so here it is, nicely pitched in the back garden for a test pitch. First thing that strikes me is the fabric, slightly brighter, shinier colour than before. Usual pitching guidelines apply. If you want help on pitching a Lanshan tent, then check out my video with some tips. So you got a two-pole tent for two people with two vestibules, so vast amount of internal space for a tent that weighs this light. I'm approaching this tent with a view to using it in the UK. In the British Isles, we get a lot of cool, damp air conditions, and that, of course, is a perfect recipe for condensation. So if you like, it's a tougher test of a single skin tent than it might be in some other atmospheric conditions. So let's talk technical, shall we? Paper and pencil at the ready. So the fly sheet is a 20 denier nylon. It's got a hydrostatic head of 2 meters, and the ground sheet, the floor, is again 20 denier but with a hydrostatic head of 6 meters. So the interior space of the inner is 230 centimeters by 120, and that compares to the standard version, which is 220 by 110. So it's 10 centimeters bigger all the way around, and that's really because there's no inner tent taking up space, so you're getting a full use of the entire space underneath the fly sheet. So it's a much more spacious tent inside, especially if you're trying to fit two people inside it. Now the compromise, of course, is that it's because it's single skin, you probably don't want to be getting too close to the walls. So although there is more space, you need kind of a margin of error all the way around as well. As it arrives, the tent is not seam sealed. So they do provide you with a little syringe to apply the seam sealant to the joints, but they don't include any seam sealant in the packaging. You need to go and find yourself a tube of Silnet and apply it yourself to the seams. Now the 3FUL website has got a very good guide as to how to do that, but you need to allow half an hour on a sunny day. You can get that done by the factory, but you've got to pay an extra £25 for the service. Now also there are loads of modifications that you can make to the Lanshan tent to make it better suited to your particular needs. If you're interested in my suggestions, I've got 2 videos. Let's have a look at the changes that have been made in the Generation 2 version. Right, so let's talk about the fabric first of all. Most important thing I guess you'd have to say about a tent. So this is now Sil nylon, that's a nylon silicone coated on both sides. But there are several good things about Sil nylon as a fabric. It's generally longer lasting than PU nylon, so it doesn't degrade so much with ultraviolet light, so it's got a longer lifespan, if you like. The other good thing about this fabric is it has a stronger tear resistance. It's more durable, it won't rip quite so easily, so if you do get a snag or a pinhole, it's not going to be the end of the world, it's not going to run and run. Second thing to note is this main zip, which is now a waterproof zip. Check it out. So it's a good quality YKK zip, waterproof, and that means that you don't need to have this sort of waterproof flap protecting the zip anymore, but it's only a one-way zip, not two-way. So the next improvement they've made to this version of the tent is that this ram's head clip at the bottom of the main doors is now made out of thin alloy, not plastic. The plastic version was known to be brittle and to snap occasionally, so this is much stronger, certainly improvement from that point of view. When you want to open the door, you have to unhook these loops from the ram's head so you can then open the door. There are a couple of problems with this arrangement. I'll talk about that in a second. A little improvement's also been made is these tie backs for the main doors. So they used to be as like a fabric, stiff fabric, but now we have elastic, and that certainly makes for a much tighter grip on the door. It is a bit more fiddly, but once it's in place, it's a lot more snug arrangement. So I'm delighted to say that another change that's been made is that the doors are now T-zip doors, both sides. Now, why is this such a big deal, such good news? It means that you can really open up this side of the tent, and it makes coming in, getting out so much easier, ventilating the tent so much easier. All in all, it's a brilliant thing. Some people like to have the door one side, some the other, but this option gives you a much more versatility. Now, you'll notice that I've got the 3-season version of this generation Lanshan 2 Pro. What's the difference? 3-season, 4-season, only one difference really, and that is that the 3-season has mesh doors, the 4-season has a solid door with a small mesh window at the top. So why have I gone for the 3-season version in this instance? Quite simply because in the Pro version in particular, to help minimise condensation, I want to be getting as much ventilation through the tent as I possibly can. And I believe that the 4-season version with the more solid doors, inevitably you're not going to get as much airflow through, and so you're going to get, if anything, more condensation rather than less. So by going for the 3-season with the mesh doors, hopefully I've got more air breeze passing through, and that'll help with any condensation issues. But of course it's all relative. Let's face it, condensation is a fact of physics, and there's only so much you can do to prevent it. Right, so now we've got inside the tent, let's have a quick look around and talk about what's happened in the Generation 2 version. 3FUO have come up with a neat arrangement for dealing with condensation. Now, I don't know if it's going to show up very well, but here is like a mesh panel, and that's sort of the way it's pitched means that mesh panel is pretty much horizontal, so any condensation runs down the tent and gets caught in that mesh panel, and hopefully it drips to the outside. Now the arrangement for that has changed a lot in this version of the tent, and that now to help with that we have this sort of, I'm going to call it a handkerchief. It's a triangular panel, and it's attached up to the inside of the side pull-out point, which is a nice idea, and you can tension it up so that this triangular panel sits just inside the inner, and I think the idea is it protects your sleeping bag foot from touching the outside and getting damp by contact with the wall. Now, I have to say, I think this is quite a neat sort of lateral thinking way of trying to solve the problem of condensation on the inside of the tent coming into contact with sleeping bags and things like that. But I've taken a long hard look at this, and I do have some reservations. Let me go through them quickly. The first thing is that if you tension this cord up too much, it basically pulls the handkerchief, for want of a better word, into contact with the outside of the tent. So it only works if this tensioner is relatively loose. But, and here's a big but, if you're lying down in the tent and the foot of your sleeping bag is in contact with the handkerchief, chances are it'll be pushing the handkerchief into contact with the outside wall anyway. I don't think this white material is particularly waterproof. It doesn't feel waterproof in any way. It feels very similar to the material they use for the inner of the 4-season version. I might be wrong. But so if it does press against the outer, you're still going to get moisture weeping through from that contact. So it's not going to provide too much protection. The other point is that this is a 2-person tent, theoretically. I think it's just too generous, 1 person personally, but in theory it's a 2-person tent. It's marketed as that. And this handkerchief is a triangular shape, so that if there's 2 of you, the foot of your sleeping bag has only got a normal amount of protection. This doesn't sort of reach high enough at the edge to provide protection from the foot of your sleeping bag when you're sleeping side by side. Now, I can't quite work out, I think they've missed an opportunity here. There is this attachment point on the flow for the retaining bungee for the doors, so it would be much better to make this triangular panel a more rectangular one, and they could have connected it up to that tie-up point, and you would have got a much bigger, better protection panel that way. If I was going to spend a few hours modifying this tent, I think that would be one of the first things I would look at. The other little niggle I've got is that in the corner where it's attached is quite a complicated construction. It looks a bit fiddly. I think that looks like the kind of point that would be a weakness in stormy weather. There's lots of seams very close to each other, and it looks a bit of a messy design, to tell the truth. I don't think it looks very satisfactory. Right, so those are the changes. Let's run through them if I can remember them all. Firstly, there's the fabric on the outside. Secondly, we've got a waterproof zip on the main fly. We've got a metal ram's head clip thingy for the bottom of the doors. Got T-shaped zips on the inner. Got little elastic tie backs for the doors. We've got the sort of condensation guard packaging thingy on the inside. So a whole raft of improvements, and I think each one of those has got something to be said for it. But do they address all the problems with this tent or not? Well, I have to say, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of opportunities that were missed in this upgrade. I'm going to run through them quickly now, see what you think. Right, let's talk about the gap underneath the bottom of the tent. Here at the sides, there's a gap of 5-6 centimetres, nice and low to the ground, very good for weatherproofing. But when you look at the gap underneath the front edge of the vestibule, that's more like 20 centimetres, something like that. It's a massive gap underneath the front edge. Now, I kind of understand why you'd need a big gap, because you're trying to improve ventilation inside the tent, minimise condensation and the like. But here in the UK, we get lots of stormy weather, rain and wind, and sometimes you just want to hunker down the tent so it's sitting nice and low to the ground to get good weatherproofing. And a massive gap like that under this front edge is just going to let loads of weather in and going to be a big problem. So it's a real shame that there's no way of adjusting or changing that. And I think that the guy line arrangement is largely to blame. So I've got a real beef about this main guy line arrangement that 3FUL seem to be persisting with. I really don't know why. The current situation is that there's one line that goes from the top of the tent down to the peg and then back up to the bottom of the doors. Firstly, by definition, you can't peg it far away from the tent, so the direction of pull from the main guy line across the ridge is definitely compromised, and you're not getting a very effective tension to support the main structure of the tent. And number two is that at the bottom of the doors, inevitably you get this floating arrangement. It does mean that it's practically impossible to unclip the ram's head because it's kind of floating when it's all under tension. I find myself releasing the tension on this bottom line lock so that I can unhook the bottom of the doors, and it's really fiddly. Definitely not a job you can do with just one hand, and I usually resort to just unzipping the door and stepping in and out through the opening, which certainly doesn't do the tent any good. The other issue with it is that because the main guy line which is opening the snout, is pulling more downwards than out, it means that this upper ventilation snout is a very narrow slot. It's only about 2 or 3 centimetres wide at its widest point, so it's not actually serving much purpose, certainly when you compare it to the massive gap at the bottom of the tent. I don't know why they wouldn't just ditch the slot if you're going to persist with a big gap at the bottom of the tent, or even better, separate out these bottom door guy lines from the main guy line, so that the main guy line is putting more horizontally and opening up a bigger gap at that top ventilation point. I think you get the drift, don't you? I don't like it, and it would have cost nothing to change it and go for a more traditional approach. So definitely a opportunity missed. The other thing I want to talk about is these side pull-out points. So it's one guy line that goes from the pull-out point down to a peg and around and back up to the bottom attachment on the side. Now, I like this. I think the standard version should have this as well, because it stabilises the bottom end of the tent, keeps it low to the ground and stops it flapping in high winds. So that's a plus. But it's a shared guy line, and that inevitably means that because the line isn't very long, the direction of pull of this side pull-out point is more down than across, and that means that inevitably, no matter how much you faff about with it, trying to get it to look good before you start filming, you get these chevron creases in the side of the tent that are a real struggle to get rid of. If this guy line was, I don't know, twice the length, then at least the direction of pull would be slightly more up and away, which would give you a better result on the side. So I've come down low to talk about my next issue. Down at the bottom of the tub here, there are two guy lines, and they share a single peg. One comes from the bottom of the bathtub and one comes from the bottom corner of the outer. Now the outer guy line has got a cord grip tensioner on it, so it's adjustable, but the line on the bottom of the bathtub does not. I'm not sure why, because inevitably that really compromises your peg placement and the tension on the bottom of the bathtub. Now, Lanshan owners might guess what I'm going to talk about next. No surprise, it's these internal pockets. When I say pockets, there's one pocket on the tent in the middle of one end, and it's tiny. I guess you could fit a phone in there or a set of car keys or something like that, but nothing else. And I just don't understand why it isn't bigger, or why there aren't more of them, perhaps at least one at either end, or perhaps one in each corner, because negligible extra weight, or make them a bit deeper or something. For goodness sake, 3FUL gear, sort it out, will ya? Right, so that's the Generation 2 Lanshan 2 Pro. What do you think? I'm really pleased to see some of the changes they've made. Good fabric, you know, the waterproof zip, bits and pieces like that. I really admire the creativity of the inner condensation guard. That's a really novel idea. That's good to see as well. But there are lots of things that they haven't sorted out. Did I mention the main guy line? I really hate it. The main guy line arrangement, the internal pocket, bits and pieces like that. So to a large extent, although it's great to see these improvements, I think it's a bit of an opportunity missed. Luckily, a lot of the deficiencies can be sorted out with your own modifications. Remember my modifications video as well. So it's not the end of the world. But for the sake of a few extra tensioners and a few extra meters of Dyneema, this could be so much better. But anyway, that's my thoughts for now. It's still, don't get me wrong, I think this is still a cracking tent. And remember the price. It's incredibly cheap, it's incredibly good value, spacious inside, reliable. I've used my standard version now for well over 120 nights now, and it's still doing me proud. So I love them to bits. So don't get me wrong, this is still a brilliant tent. Could it have been a little bit better? I'll leave you to decide. But thanks for watching anyway. And if you're interested in this tent, check out my other videos about Lanshan tents on my channel. And I'll see you again next time.